What do you think you'd never have to explain to a grown adult? Story 1 in 6th grade, we had a substitute teacher talking to us about the solar system. Teacher, is Mars hotter or colder than Earth? Me, colder. Teacher, no. It is actually hotter. Me, no, it's not. It's further from the sun. It is definitely colder. Teacher, but it's red. Story 2, during the first few weeks of college, I did my laundry and was told by one of my roommates that she needs help because she didn't know how to do hers. I went down to help her, and I guess other people found out because pretty soon I had an audience of like 20 college freshmen in the laundry room, teaching them step by step how to wash their clothes. I swear, I thought everyone knew how to operate a washing machine by the time they turned 10. Edit, my mom would be so proud to know that one of my top comments so far was about being able to do my own laundry. I don't think I'll tell her, however, her smugness might suffocate me. Story 3, oh, also, I had a conversation with my cousin about Pluto, and of course it started off, I remember when we were kids, it was considered a planet. Yeah, it's crazy they found out it was actually a star. What? No, they just reclassified it as a dwarf planet. No, that was the whole thing. They realized it wasn't a planet at all, but in fact the sun edit, it is worth mentioning that he looked it up on Wikipedia to prove me wrong. Story 4, I worked in a toy store that had a giant children's map hanging on the wall. And one day a woman and her friend were arguing. Lady 1, excuse me, miss, do you know what's the capital of Africa? I'm sorry, I don't understand. Lady 2, the capital city of Africa, it's Egypt, right? Lady 1, no, it's Kenya. I think you're both actually confused. Egypt and Kenya are their own countries. Africa doesn't have one single capital. Each country has its own. Lady 1, no, you don't understand, like Washington for the U.S. or Toronto for Canada. Canada and the U.S. are their own countries. Africa is not a country. Africa is made of many countries. Lady 1, Lady 2 blank stares me. Africa is a continent like Europe. You know how Europe has different countries like France or Spain? Ladies nod, and you know that Paris is the capital city of France. Nods, and Rome is the capital city of Italy. Nod, and that Europe, the continent, doesn't have one single capital city, but lots of them, one for each country in the continent. Nods, Africa is like that. Africa, the continent, is made of many different countries. Each country in Africa, the continent, has its own capital city. Egypt and Kenya are African countries, and each one of them has their own capital city. Cairo is Egypt's capital, and Kenya's is Nairobi. There are lots of different capital cities in Africa, the continent. Africa itself has no one single capital, as it is not a country. Lady 1, 2, oh, we are literally standing in front of a world map. These women are in their 40s. They had no idea that Africa was not a single country. Again, we are standing in front of a world map. ETA, okay. Canadians, I apologize for not correcting them about Ottawa. Story 5, a waiter was confused once when the name on my credit card didn't look like me. I'm Asian. My name is not. I was adopted, and I had to explain adoption and why adoption is a good thing and that it's not. As he put it, some guy raising another dude's kid. Edit, wow. Top comment for a shitty experience at lunch is making me feel better. Thanks all. Story 6, girls do not menstruate and urinate from the same place. I was required to take ed in college, LOL, North Carolina school system, and there were a ton of girls that didn't know this. All of the out-of-state students had to be told to stop laughing. Story 7, my brother had a history teacher who sent him to the principal's office for arguing with her that they had guns in the Civil War. She was convinced that they still used swords only and got really mad when this 8th grader disagreed. Edit, I would like to say this is completely true, and I've changed it to principal. Edit, wow, I really didn't think my comment would get this much attention. Thanks, guys. Story 8, how to blow your nose. My wife, GF at the time, kept rubbing her nose with a tissue when she had a cold so much that her tissues would be. She thought that was normal. In her defense, her mom has no parenting skills, and I'm shocked her kid survived. Story 9, why did those people keep inventing new languages? They only made communication much more complicated. Yesterday, I had to explain to my mother that great majority of the languages was not invented by single persons. Story 10, just recently, I had to explain to a friend that the September 11th attacks were actually real. He grew up in a very sheltering household, so his parents never told him what 911 was when he first heard about 2 planes being crashed into a building. He thought that someone had made it up. After showing him footage and news reports from the attacks, he was forced to conclude that it actually happened. Story 11, to protect someone's job. I'll leave out any identifying details from the story. A friend of mine is a teacher and was being interviewed by the principal during quarterly reviews. Typically, they just ask how things are going, which classes they like to teach, stop teaching, whether the students are learning the curriculum. The principal informs her that a large number of students are failing her classes. 20 in one class and 30 in another, and 10 in another. She explains that these numbers are quite normal since a lot of students just don't show up to class, much less school. and that there's nothing she could do about that. The principal counters with no, you don't understand. You're failing 60 of your students. This means you need to adjust your teaching methods. It took her a few seconds to comprehend what the principal had done. Yes, he added percentages. She didn't want to embarrass him, so she just agreed and said, yes, they'll see what we can do about this, and then told one of the district managers. I really wish she had explained it to him. Makes me wonder what would happen when the percentages are even higher. I'm sorry, but we're going to have to let you go. You're apparently failing 130 of your students. Story 12, that Canada was its own, separate country and not part of the United States. The reason, but they speak English in BC, doesn't look foreign, and that movies and stuff are made there. Story 13 had a patient tell me I should try a medication before I prescribed it. I had to explain that taking meds I don't need could be detrimental to my health, and that there are thousands of meds I have to try. He asked how I knew what the meds did, and I said we learned in pharm class. He then told me a good practitioner doesn't learn from reading, they learn by doing, and I'd never be good at my job, lol. Story 14, my wife is working as a teacher's assistant in an elementary school, and the other day she had to correct the teacher by telling the kids that no, Barack Obama is not the 100th president of the United States of America. Not even close. Oh, and she's also had to correct her teacher's assertion that there are 9 planets, although some people say that Pluto isn't a planet, that it's a star. Story 15, I work at a fabric store. I frequently have to tell adults that a yard is 3 feet, which means that there are 36 inches to a yard. I've also had to explain basic fractions like that 13 is bigger than 14. Also, that there's not a standard size for windows. So, telling me you want to make curtains that are window-sized doesn't really help me figure out how much fabric you need. Story 16, not even joking that you can breathe through your mouth. Not even that they just never realized they did, but that in all their memory, they never breathed through their mouth before. Unfathomable. Story 17, I had to try and explain to my A-level math teacher that a square is a type of rectangle, just one where all sides happen to be equal. She refused to accept she was wrong for about 20 minutes until head of department came in for a book and ended up agreeing with me. Story 18, income tax. Making more money will never result in you having less money after taxes, barring very unusual circumstances which are not related to taxes. Story 19, basic hygiene. We have this guy at work that either has a dead mouse living under his gut, doesn't know how to wipe, doesn't believe in bathing, or just stinks from the drive to work. He's even married, and I swear she has no sense of smell. Nice guy, hard worker, and very knowledgeable, but does he stink? Story 20, once when I was 10, I had to explain to a 30-year-old teacher that a circle was infinitely symmetrical, i.e., it had an infinite amount of lines of symmetry. He was convinced it had 360. I started drawing lines of symmetry between the degree lines. Story 21, I had to explain to my wife that even though I had deleted my account from FB and removed it from my faves folder, I hadn't actually deleted the whole website. Silly woman thought I had deleted it from the internet. Story 22, my friend had to tell me what the word fellatio meant at the tender age of 25. Before this conversation, I just thought it was a nice Italian-sounding name. Story 23, I'm pregnant and due in October. Anyways, I was at a garage sale a few weeks ago with my mom. We were looking at baby clothes. She kept holding up summery light, sleeveless onesies and outfits in a size 12 months. I kept telling her it would be too cold for the baby to wear those kind of outfits when she's 12 months. My mom asked how I knew. I looked at her, dumbfounded, and explained that 12-month from October 2013 is October 2014, and it gets mighty cold in October in these parts. She looked amazed that I was able to figure out what 12-month from a certain date was, as if I were some kind of wizard. Story 24, when I first moved out from my parents, I had noticed that my roommate and I were going through an insane amount of toilet paper for 2 guys, so I eventually asked him how and he wipes his. He explained to me that he just rolls as much toilet paper he sees fit and wads it into a ball. Then he'll wipe with said ball of toilet paper until there's blood on the paper. Once he sees that blood, waddle over to the mirror and spread his cheeks to make sure he's clean. After being in shock, I then had to explain the how normal people wipe their asses. We still go through a roll once every 2 days, edit grammar. Story 25 explained to a 25-year-old that make it rain was a reference to money and not to jizzing on someone on a side note. I like her definition more than the real one. Story 26, my friend had lived a pretty cozy life in a suburban mansion up until he sublet a small NYC apartment with me. He had no idea how to use an ice cube tray and believed that you had to just crack in half to get the ice out. Thankfully, we only lost one, but watching him shoot ice all over the place in utter confusion will always be one of the funniest things I've seen of late. Story 27, I had to tell some 21-year-old that he needs to clean his belly button if it smells. And his reaction was, what? You can clean it. Also to the same person that he should scrub his feet more when washing them if they still smell. What? You supposed to scrub your feet, and still to the same person that he should brush his back teeth better to reduce the chance of getting cavities. I thought you only need to brush your front teeth so they look nice, and again to the same person that he should start wearing deodorant. And I always wondered where the smell came from before that. Story 28, as a 911 dispatcher, the amount of times I have to explain that 911 is for emergencies and not because another adult was mean to you on Facebook is a bit much. Story 29, why English is spoken in the USA. My mom just thought it was a coincidence that the English language developed in so many different countries at the same time. Story 30, I had to explain to someone why the outside part of a window air conditioner gets hot. They had no idea and were amazed by the concept. They said, I thought an air conditioner made cold. In hindsight, I suppose given how electric heaters work, someone might think that you could make cold like you make heat. Story 31, as someone studying education at university and taking English as one of my teaching areas, I never thought I would have to explain to a fellow tertiary level English student the difference between nouns, pronouns, proper nouns, verbs, adverbs, and adjectives. We were sitting in class, and they literally looked at me and said, I don't know what a pronoun is, so I said it's used to replace a personal noun, so that you're not saying John did this and John did that all the time. To this they replied by asking what's a noun. This continued until all the different types of grammar had been explained. Story 32, I was watching the news on TV the other day, when there was a story on how large portions of the population don't know the answers to some simple questions. One of the questions was, how long does it take for the Earth to travel around the sun? I asked my mother, and I was shocked to realize that she didn't know. She thought it was no big deal that she didn't know. Story 33, my office window overlooks a small research facility. Today, they had their regular liquid nitrogen delivery, which is piped in and makes a fair bit of noise and escaped vapor. Our cleaner was in the office. He's about 35 and a nice enough guy, if a little over chatty at times. He was distracted by the noise, so looked out and was amazed worried to see all the gas going everywhere. I tried to reassure him that it was harmless and just liquid nitrogen being delivered. This was a new concept for him, and he wanted to know what it was and what it's used for to help keep things really cold. How? It's just like really cold ice. You know, as in dry ice. What's dry ice? The stuff they use in smoke machine and music videos. So it's smoke. Why doesn't it set fire to stuff? Because it's not really smoke. That's just what they call it. Because it looks like smoke. It's more like steam, really. So how is it cold if it's steam? Because it's not water steam. Water is a liquid at room temperature and turns into vapor or steam at 100 degrees. Nitrogen is a liquid below freezing point and turns to a vapor or looks like steam at room temperature. How is it a liquid if it's frozen? Because different substances are either solid, liquid, or gas at different temperatures. When we say boiling or freezing, we're really just talking about the temperature water boils or freezes it. Nah. You're pulling my leg. I gave up. Yeah, sorry. It's hot chemicals they're pumping really, and that is steam. Just don't go near it when you leave the building if they're not finished. TLDR, some people have no idea what liquid nitrogen is. Story 34, my dad is 53. Started his own business 25 years ago and has done remarkably well in life. But just the other day, I had to explain to him that birds are not mammals and that snakes are not invertebrates. Story 35, had to explain to a 25-year-old coworker the other day that in fact hurricanes and tornadoes are two different weather occurrences. She immediately Googled hurricanes because she did not believe they never make contact with the ground. I'm no meteorologist, but... Story 36, that children aren't born able to speak a specific language. My stepmom and dad adopted my sister from Guatemala. My sister was only a few months old when adopted, and my brother-in-law asked my parents if they knew how to speak Spanish. My stepmom answered no. My brother-in-law then proceeded to ask how my parents were going to communicate with my adopted sister. My stepmom had to explain to him that my sister would speak English and not Spanish. He is now a former brother-in-law and has been for years, and that's a good thing. Story 37, queefing. To my girlfriend's mother, Cards Against Humanity, in graduate school in the United States. I had to explain to a girl what Republicans and Democrats were. She said she had always heard those on the news, but didn't know what they were talking about. Story 38, gravity. My friend GF thought that if you jumped out of a plane you would float there until you pulled your chute. Then you would float down with the extra weight of the giant parachute. You know, because parachutes are really light when rolled up in a ball, but become super heavy when they're all spread out and stuff. She was in her 30s. Story 39, I was sitting having drinks with my girlfriend and a large group of her friends. On comes the song, Moves Like Jagger. Laughingly, I say, I bet there are kids who love this song, but have no idea who Mick Jagger is. Poker faces all around. None of them had a clue who he was. Story 40, when we were watching the movie Lincoln, which revolves around the passing of the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery. My GF turned to me and asked me, do they pass it? I was speechless. Story 41. This entire summer of my internship, I've been trying to tell the adults here that our meetings are entirely pointless. We talk in circles and nothing is ever solved, but they insist since this is how they've done things for 30 years, then they should just continue to waste time and money for an hour of pointless conversation. And they wonder why the company is going under. Story 42. This is an actual quote my brother got from his classmate in high school in grade 11 while they were learning about the Holocaust. Wait, is this based off that Anne Frank movie? The girl thought the Holocaust was a fictional event based off the diary of Anne Frank. Story 43. Just today at work, I work maintenance in subsidized housing. I had to explain to a tenant that only paying half of your electric bill can in no way affect how many of your outlets work. Edit effect versus effect. Story 44. Another September 11th story. A girl I knew insisted the 911 attack was conducted by one plane. I tried fishing the logic out of her. She thought the plane flew through the first building, came around for a second approach, then crashed into the second building. To this day, she is the dumbest person I've ever had the privilege of meeting. Story 45. I used to work in an internet cafe back in '96. One day the manager was printing out a picture she had downloaded. I noticed her staring at it looking very puzzled. When she asked me how many colors are in that printer, I said 3, but there are more than 3 colors in the picture. Story 46. How the menstrual cycle works. One day, he's bragging about scoring a 97 in biology class, and the next day, he's asking why us girls don't just sit down on the toilet and push it all out at once because that seems so much easier than dragging it out for a full week. Story 47. Had to explain to a guy in my old job that fax machines don't actually send the sheet of paper itself to the other fax machine. He was like, wait a minute. Why is it coming back out? That's not supposed to happen, is it? Story 48. It's unbelievable how many people my fiancé and I have to tell that you need to be able to prove that you bought a product from a company before they'll let you return it. Story 49. I had to explain to my middle school foods class teacher that meat is the cut-up bodies of dead animals. She was convinced that meat just sort of grew on animals, and that it was harvested like wool. Even after I explained it, I was a 7th grader, she still didn't believe me. The thing that was most upsetting was that the rest of the kids who sat at my table believed her, and not me. And I've spent my life wondering if any of them internalized her misinformation and still believe it as adults. Story 50. To a 40-something native English speaker in a higher level position to me, when writing first, second, third, fourth, etc., you don't just add SD after all the numerals, first 2 SD, 3 SD for SD. Story 51. For the football interested, I had to explain that UEFA is not a country, but an organization. She wouldn't believe me, because just before there was an interview with the president of UEFA. I also had to explain to my little brother that when the FedEx president in Castaway said that FedEx lost 5 sons, he didn't mean it literally. My brother thought for years that Tom Hanks' character lost 4 brothers in the plane crash. Story 52. Just yesterday, I had to explain to a first grade teacher, while she was teaching her class, how to figure out what 56 of 36 was, via text message. She cried. Story 53. I had to explain to a 21-year-old college student that he can in fact contract AIDS from unprotected. At 21 years old, he thought that only gay men could contract HIV. At first, I thought he was joking. He wasn't. We live in California and receive ed in 5th, 6th, and 7th grade, and we are also obligated to take health in high school and in college. I seriously have no idea how at 21 he still thought only gay men could contract AIDS. Story 54. If you hit a pedestrian or someone on a bicycle with your car, yes, you do in fact need to file a police report. Yes, even though your Escalade is perfectly fine. Story 55. My mother-in-law is a 4-year-old in a 60-year-old's body. I would never have expected to meet a person that ignorant and that unwilling to learn about anything. I can't even think of an example, because there are so many little ones. Also, I had to tell my ex-roommate that had a master's degree that reptiles are indeed animals. Story 56. That the amount of slices in your pizza does not affect how much pizza you are getting. I've worked in a few pizza shops in my life, and couldn't tell you how many times I have customers come in and ask how many slices are in each size pie, then proceed to be confused as to why one pie is more expensive than the other if they both have 8 slices. It's down to the point that when a customer comes in and asks that question, I just giggle to myself to try and counter the impeding frustration. Story 57. That trimming your toenails is a thing. When I was in college, this one girl was getting dressed to go out. She was complaining that all her socks had holes in them, so I looked down at her feet and saw that she had toenails like the Wolverine's adamantium claws. I think I said, "Why don't you try trimming your toenails?" And she was all like, "What? And I was like, wait, you have never heard of trimming your toenails, have you? She was incredulous, couldn't believe that people did such a thing. Her roommate then brought out a toenail clipper. Unreal. The girl's parents had never taught her this basic grooming thing. Those were some feet. Let me tell you, still makes my skin crawl. Story 58, I had an 11th grade history teacher get mad at me for saying something about people being different races, blacks, whites, sec. She made me apologize in front of the class for implying that they were not humans. I think she thought that race is species. Story 59, I'm a bit late, but this has been bothering me for a while. I work in promotions, giving away little promotional things with our logo on it. When people would ask what our soft drinking giveaways were, I'd explain, they're magnets, perfect for the fridge, or killing your friend's iPhone or credit card. After the fifth or sixth person who was shocked and amazed that magnets posed a potential threat to electronics and bank cards, I lost a bit of faith in humanity. Edit, I've learned today that while magnets are dangerous to OLD credit cards, VHS, and other media of that style, that newer technology has resistant to any magnets that would be given out for a free promotion. I also learned that I need a giant electromagnet to be a supervillain. Edit, 2 nobody reads comments. 1. It was a joke that a small fridge magnet could damage an iPhone. 2. Read other comments, and please do not comment the exact same sentence as 2 or 3 others have posted. Story 60, I work in retail, and every week there are different goods reduced. That means that there's a sign with the usual price and underneath that a big red sign with special action on it with a cheaper price. Every week, I have to explain to a grown adult why there are 2 prices and which one is the right one. Story 61, I don't know why I'm bothering posting a 9-hour-old post with over 6K comments, but I have a pretty good one. I had to explain the concept of gravity. I was debating creationism with one of my friend's dad's dad, pretty close with his son's friend, so it wasn't awkward. And he said an example of intelligent design was that the Earth had gravity. I had to explain that gravity was pervasive and all planets have gravity. Story 62, folks. I used to work as an on-site support technician for a school system in Louisiana. One day, I was out clearing tickets, and I went into a 3rd grade classroom. There was a woman in there instructing an English class with a projector. She would read each slide the class would repeat after her. When suddenly, I was nearly toppled when my brain tried to hold me back from screaming in pain. The slide read, "The monkey do tricks," and the class repeated after her, "The monkey do tricks." I got her attention, began to set up her computer system. I was returning. When she came over, I tried to be subtle about it, inquired about the projector. "Is it broken?" She didn't seem to think so. I said, "Well, it's not teaching proper English." She looked confused. I informed her that it is incorrect to say the monkey do tricks. She looked at me like I was an idiot. I explained to her the monkey does tricks. The monkey has done tricks. The monkey will do tricks. Then it clicked. She became upset with me. I must have been some kind of magician to come in there and break the stupid curse. My boss heard about this from someone at the school. When I returned to the main office, he asked me, "Did you tell an English teacher she was wrong in front of her class?" I said I had. He asked me why I would do that. And I said because she was teaching 3rd graders to say the monkey do tricks. He looked at me and shook his head, said, "Yeah, okay, good work." So I'm not going to phrase a lot now. "Yeah, okay, good work." My dad used to correct me all the time. I scored a 30-ish combo that day. Story 63, my mother asked if werewolves were real. When I asked her why she thought that, she said, "Well, for a while I thought reindeer were made up too, so I thought maybe it was wrong about werewolves. When I learned that Santa was fake, I figured the reindeer were too." She didn't believe that reindeer existed until she was in her 30s. Story 64, that not going your first day of work because your cat will be depressed is not a valid reason. Complaining to me that you didn't get paid for that missed day of work, and you should, when you didn't work due to depressed cat, is not how the world works. Story 65, in the military, and an infantry recruit was complaining how it takes him too much time running to the bathroom to pee because the belts were standard issued are a pain in them to put back on. So naturally, I asked why he's taking his belt off, and he looks at me like I'm an idiot. So it turns out that since he was a wee lad, he's been undoing his belt and the top button of his pants to use urinals, and never knew the wiser since he's not checking other dudes out, and no one said anything to him. So I educate him about the entire purpose of the fly. Later that day, he comes running up to me with a grin going ear to ear. "You've changed my life." He's yelling, "You're welcome, Private. You're welcome." He's 24 in case you're wondering, and I'm 28. Story 66, that the moon and the sun don't travel around the world at the same speed. The moon isn't only there at night. Also, that Venus doesn't only show itself in the morning, but it's the morning star. Story 67, that rivers don't go in circles. I'm a raft guide, and I usually have to explain this to a couple people every season. They have this idea of a raft trip, that it's going to be like something like Disneyland where you get off the ride back at the beginning. And I have to explain that actually the river continues downhill until it reaches bigger rivers, and ultimately the ocean. I don't know how people reach adulthood without knowing what a river is. Story 68 that you should read to your kids at an early age. I always grew up with books at my disposal, but apparently a lot of parents don't think about it. My son's eyes light up when bring home a new book, and he might as well be in a candy store when we take him to the bookstore. Story 69. I had to explain to a former coworker once that when you go from England to Scotland, you don't have to change your currency. She really couldn't understand why we didn't need to change our English pounds into Scottish pounds. I tried for an hour to explain that the UK uses sterling, and that while Scottish notes look different, they're still recognized as sterling currency, and that she was fine to use her English pound while we were visiting. It was a long trip. Story 70, let me introduce my 25 years old coworker who's lived in Massachusetts her whole life and has a degree in biology, didn't know who Whitey Bulger was, didn't know what affirmative action meant, didn't know what chronological meant, didn't know what a sabbatical was, couldn't spell exercising, couldn't spell weather, thought that her phone internet connection was slow because I was using the internet on my phone, not Wi-Fi. Story 71, as an EMT basic student, I responded to a man who called 911 complaining of an insect crawling up his ear. Upon arrival, we asked what ear the bug crawled into. He says his right ear, but keeps complaining about burning coming from his left ear. We noticed his wife standing next to him holding a bottle of insect spray. Upon further questioning, we come to find out she sprayed insecticide into his left ear, thinking it would flush the insect out of his right ear. I had to explain to her that our ear canals are separated by our brain. Story 72, my mother-in-law thinks Obama is a fascist and a communist because she watches Fox News. I should have shut my mouth, but I couldn't help myself and told her that they were on the opposite ends of the ideological spectrum, and it was impossible for someone to be both. I told her it was like being a midget and a giant at the same time. She was mad at me for weeks. Story 73, you are breaking Rule 1. Unless you edit out your story and put it in the comments now, it will be deleted. Edit C mods. Warning them is much more effective. Story 74, when I was in uni, I was watching The Boy in striped pajamas with my ex and her housemates. Halfway through the film, one of them turns around and explains she's really confused about the film and doesn't get why there's a fence and the kid seems to be in some kind of prison. So we explained that it's about the Holocaust. She asked us what the Holocaust was and everyone went silent. So I thought whatever, 20th century history isn't her strong point, and this somehow slipped her mind, even though I'm sure it's part of the compulsory curriculum when you're at school. Also, being from the UK, it's not like we forgot about that particular war. So we explained that this was a horrific event of genocide in World War II. And then she got more confused as she thought that's what is being fought now. I honestly couldn't believe she managed to get into a pretty good university with this information somehow slipping by her. Luckily, if you're wondering, she wasn't a history student. Story 75. If there is a bill due, you pay it. For example, bill comes a restaurant. You pitch in what you owe, rent is due, you pay it. If you can't figure this out, people will not want to hang out with or live with you. Story 76, I was teaching a college anatomy physiology course anatomy lab. The subject for that day was the female reproductive system. There was a life-size poster of a man and women with full anatomical breakouts. A young man was staring at the poster, looking at his lab book, then back at the poster for a good 10 minutes. Then comes over to me and says I can't find the clitoris. I walk over to the poster, point, while saying, your girlfriend will thank me. I wasn't allowed to TA after that. Story 77, I'm 20 and colorblind, and I often have my girlfriend friend's family correct me on colors. I learned just last month that peanut butter is, in fact, not green. Story 78, I had to explain to a 20 years old the difference between Indians, people from India, and Native Americans. After about 10 minutes, I'm fairly confident he understood. Story 79, that cats in other countries do not sound different due to an accent. I told her they sounded the same, and she asked, did you actually hear them purr or meow? Since I couldn't clearly remember if I had, she's not yet convinced they don't have accents. Story 80, I had to explain to my boss who taught writing at a community college that English is not a romance language. She refused to believe me, stating it has a lot of Latin words. Triton College, FTW. Story 81, the idea of a three-way light switch to a 50-year-old nurse at a hospital. She refused to believe or listen to reason about how no, we did not install your switch upside down. I told her there was another switch that controlled the same lights, which she also didn't believe until I showed her, but she still refused to accept the fact that the original switch wasn't upside down. I even showed her how it worked. I eventually had to just walk across the room, flip down the other switch, then go to the first switch and flipped it up to turn on the lights. There, it's fixed. I said, see, now that wasn't so hard, was it? Oh my God, lady, I will strangle you. Story 82. I had to recite all 12 months of a year to a 24-year-old after he couldn't remember what the month after September was. This happened during the third week of October. Yes, really? Story 83. I had a roommate in college who vehemently denied that animals have genitals. She was convinced that genitals were a human-only phenomenon. Her reason: she grew up with a male cat, and she had never noticed his penis. When I asked her how she thought animals reproduced, she looked at me, tilted her head to the side, and said that God just sent baby animals down to Earth. This woman was 18 years old and in studying computer science at a rather prestigious school.